Kadosh Boker or Masechet Gittin Daf Nuntet Amud Aleph 59a1. We're just starting on the last line of Nunchet Amud 58b, where the Gemara says, Amar Rav. Rav comes and he says, Ana Avai Beminyana Deve Rabbi. I was one of the Dayanim that Rabbi placed when they came and they said that if there's going to be land of the Sikrikon, right, for 12 months before, he's going to be Zoche. So he comes and he says, Uminai Didi Manu Bereisha. And he says, and from me, they started, which means that when they came and they wanted to find out what do we decide, I was the first one that they asked, what is your decision? You know, for example, in jury duty, right, there's turns. What do you decide? What do you decide? What do you decide? So he was the first one that they asked what to decide. So says the Gemara, 1 second, how could that be? We already learned in the Mishan and Sanhedrin. Dinei Mamonot, whether we're talking about things of Dinei Mamonot or Taharot V'tumot, Matchilim Min HaGadol. You always start with the greatest one, which means you're going to ask the greatest of the Dayanim. But to do with Dinei Nefashot, right? There, matchilim min hatzad. We ask from the smallest ones. We don't ask the greatest ones. Why? Because since it has nothing to do with the, to do with Dinei Mamonot, we should ask, right? We should ask exactly what's going on. So therefore, why was Rav asked at the beginning? If he wasn't the greatest one there, why was he asked? So answers the Gemara. Amar Rabba bered Rava. Says Rabba, the son of Rava, ve'itema Rabbi Hillel. Rabbi Valas, he comes and he says, Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Valas, Shane Minyana de Rabbi was different. The Minyan of Rabbi, the Kulu Minyanai hu minatzar mitchilim. They would always start from the Ktanim, always, right? Which the truth is, I actually understand why, right? You would start from the Tzad. You know why? Because many times, if you're going to start from the Gadol, so then nobody else is going to have their opinion. Correct? That's key that you have one dayan. But imagine right now you have the head, and he's going to say A. So now, if he knows 20 times more than I do, why would I say B? It makes me look like a fool. So therefore, if I'm going to ask the Gadol, I'm going to go with the Gadol says. So therefore, it makes sense even to start from the Katan. But that was the Shita of, right, of Rabbi, right? So he comes and he says that was the Shita of Rabbi. Okay, that means basically that was his Shita, that in every case, doesn't matter, Dinei Mamonot, Dinei Nefashot, always you start min ha-tzad. The Amar, right, Rabba, bered Rava, says Rabba, the son of Rava, Item Rabbi Hillel, bered, some people say again the same thing, it's Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Balas, Mimot Moshe v'ad Rabbi lo matzinu Torah u'gdula b'makom echad. From the days of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we never found that there was such great of Torah and wealth and greatness in the same place. Meaning by Moshe Rabbeinu, it was known. But not only by Moshe, from Moshe until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, there was no such thing. That you had both in such a high caliber. Okay? So ask the Gemara, Velo, are you going to tell me why they didn't have that? It says, Yoshua bin Nun. Yoshua bin Nun was a Gadol Ador, right? So you did have Gadol and Torah in one place. Answers the Gemara, no, it was Havi Elazar. There was Elazar at Kohen. And Elazar was Gadol B'Torah, just like Yoshua. So he wasn't the same thing, meaning by Moshe Rabbeinu, he was up there, right? And he had, so Torah Udula in one place. But by Yoshua is Yoshua and Elazar Kohen. So it's two of them. It wasn't by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, it was only Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He was he was up there. There was nobody on that caliber. So from Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbi, right, there was no such thing as such a thing. So he says, 1 second, Hav Elazar ben Aaron Kohen, right? He says, 1 second, are you going to tell me Elazar, he was by himself after Yoshua bin Nun passed away? And says, I have a Pinchas. It was Pinchas. Pinchas was the son of Elazar. So Pinchas was at the same time Elazar Kohen. So ask the Gemara, fine, but by Pinchas, after Yoshua passed away, and after Elazar passed away, it was Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron Kohen. And so the Gemara, you Zikanim, there was a Zikanim. Right? So once it was a Zikanim, they had it. Hava Shaul, there was Shaul HaMelech. Says Hava Shemuel, there was Shemuel HaNavi. Right? So it says the Gemara, Vanach Namsheh. He says, 1 second, but Shemuel passed away. And so the Gemara, Kulu Shane Kamnin, and we're talking about all, right, of the years, which means at the beginning when Shaul came up, Shaul HaNavi was still there. So the fact that Shemuel HaNavi was still there, Shaul was not by himself in the highest of position, because Shemuel was alive at the time. You're right, at the end of the life of Shaul, Shemuel HaNavi passed away, and then right? He lived, right, for a little bit afterwards. But no, it wasn't like that. So ask the Gemara, Havi David HaMelech, and says the Gemara, Have Ira Haya'iri. Ira Haya'iri was a Gadol B'Torah. So therefore, since he was a Gadol B'Torah, right, it says, so therefore, he was on the same level of David. So ask the Gemara, V'hanach Nafshe, he says, one second, but Ira Haya'iri, he died during the lifetime of David. So the Gemara answers the same thing, Kulu Shana Beinan, the exact same thing. There has to be all the years of the person's life. Okay, so ask the Gemara, Shlomo Melech. Says Shimon ben Gera. Shimon ben Gera was actually greater than Shlomo, right? Not only was it the same level, he was in greater than Shlomo Melech. So says the Gemara in Torah, yes. So he says, v'hakatle. He says, one second, but he killed him. Meaning Shlomo killed Shimi ben Gera, right? That was the famous thing that since he was Marad b'malchut, right? So therefore, if you remember, he was Marad b'malchut. So David HaMelech came and he told Shlomo, make sure that he doesn't live a long life. So he went and he said, no problem. What are you going to do? An exile. You know what the exile is? Exact opposite. You're not allowed to leave Yerushalayim. So now, technically speaking, right, if you tell a person you're not allowed to leave, imagine right now I come and I tell you, and this happens all the time, I tell you during the green card, you're not allowed to leave America. America's huge, right? It could take you an entire lifetime to go from the East Coast to the West Coast to the North to the South to the this to the it's crazy. Yeah, it's huge. But the second that you tell a person you're not allowed to leave, you feel trapped. Right, so Shlomo Melech already did b'kochmato that he told them you're not allowed to leave Yerushalayim. The second he told them you're not allowed to do Yerushalayim. Now in Yerushalayim you had everything. You had the Bet HaMikdash, you had this, you had the regalim, you had people coming in, coming out. You had anything that you need. So what do you have to go out of Yerushalayim? He said no. What happened was the second that happened, he went out and then he was killed. So because of that, right? So he says he killed him. Answers the Gemara again. Kulu shane kamnin, and again you have all the years. So says the Gemara, have Chizkiah Melech. Says no, have a Shivna. Shivna was greater about Torah than Chizkiah HaMelech.
What's the concept of all the years?
Meaning that you needed the entire lifetime, right? The entire lifetime, you needed that he was the greatest. He says it wasn't the entire lifetime because even if the beginning of the lifetime, it was somebody else, or the beginning of the Gedulah, right? Somebody else was also there. So for even though afterwards he was left by himself, but you needed the entire transition period of his greatness, that he was the only one. That he was the only one. So says the Gemara, there was Chizkiah Melech. Says no, there was Shevna. Shevna was actually greater than Chizkiah HaMelech. Okay, here he comes and he says that he used to be Duresh Barabim and everything. So he says Ha'iktil. He says 1 second, but he was killed by Chizkiah Melech. Right? The Gemara actually brings down right that Sancheriv Melech Ashur, he went and he killed Shivna. Okay, so he comes and he says Kulu Shani Kamnin, and the same thing that we answered before. So ask the Gemara Ezra Sofer. Ezra Sofer, when he came up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he was also great. He says, no, Nechemiah ben Chachaliah, you had Nechemiah ben Chachaliah, right? That he was greater than Ezra in his power, not in Chokhmah, because in other cases, many times it was greater in Gadol B'Torah. Right here, it's not Gadol B'Torah, it's Gadol B'Srara, because we needed Torah Ugdula b'makom echad, which means Torah and power in the same hand. Rabbi Yudan Nasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, he had the power. Okay, which is very, very important. Okay, so he says, Amar Ravacha bered Rava, says Ravacha bered Rava, Afani Omer, I'm also going to say, Minot Rebbe ve'ad Ravashi, lo matzinu Torah ugdula b'makom echad. We didn't see Torah and Gedula b'makom echad. We didn't see Torah and Gedula in one place. So says the Gemara, Velo, ve'ava Huna bar Natan, you had Huna bar Natan. And so the Gemara, Shane Huna bar Natan was great, even though he was greater in Torah and Gedula, by the way. Okay, so he comes and he says, right, until you had Rav Huna bar Natan. So he comes and he says, Shanu bar Natan, the Mechaf Havikaif lil Ravashi, which means that no matter how great he was, he still put himself under Rav Ashi. Okay, so therefore, even though he was also great in Torah Ugdula, but he put himself kilu tachat Rav Ashi, and therefore, since he put himself under Rav Ashi, he didn't have that. Mishnah now comes and says as follows: Cheresh, Romez v'nirmaz. A Cheresh could hint. Remember, a Cheresh is a deaf mute. He could hint with his hands or his head to somebody. V'nirmaz, and they could actually also come and start hinting to him as well. And then, in all the cases, whatever was done is going to be chal, which means, let's say he sold the property or things like that. So it's going to be chal. Ben Mitra says, Kofetz. He could actually come and do it with the movement of his lips, v'nikpatz, right? And the same thing with the movement of his lips. B'metaltalin, right? And it's going to be good with anything of metaltalin of movable objects. A piutot. We're talking about ktanim. Mekach, right? Mikhan mekach or mekach b'metaltalin. The same thing. Whatever they buy and sell is going to be good to do with metaltalin. Says the Gemara Amar of Nachman. Says Rav Nachman. Machloket b'metaltalin. A machloket is going to be with movable objects. But to do with gitin, divre atkol, according to everybody, the cheresh could only be megaresh. Beremizah. What does it mean beremizah? With the hinting of his hands or his head, and not just with his lips. When he has like to hint it out. Okay. Now he comes and he says, right, as follows. Right? Pshita says the Gemara, obviously. He says we're talking about metaltalin, right? And that's what we're talking about. So he says, Ma'udatema, I would have thought to say af bemetaltalin, even with metaltalin that he's going to acquire a kinyan gamur, right? And kolshkem begitin, also the same thing. Once he was mekadesh b'kvitza. So he says, Kamashmalan comes to teach you Rav Nachman. The kavanah of him is that kvitza is going to help dafka metaltalin and not with gitin. That means to do with a get, it does not help the kvitza, which is like the movement of the lips, but rather you have to hint, right, in the other forms as well. Says the Gemara, there are those that say, Rav Nachman says, the exact same machloket between Tanakama and Ben Mitera, whether he's allowed to use his lips to do the mekach or memkar b'metaltalin, is the exact same machloket to do with gitin. So says the Gemara, v'ha'anan b'metaltalin tznan. So he says, 1 second, but I thought they were talking about b'metaltalin. So says the Gemara, eima af b'metaltalin. He says also with metaltalin. What does that mean? Kol shekem begitin, but also metaltalin. Fine. Says the Gemara, hapiutot michan mekach memkara memkar b'metaltalin. We just said that young children, their mekach memkar, everything is going to be good, whatever they buy and sell to do metaltalin. That kama. When is a person considered a paut? Right? So he says, machve Rav Yehuda Rav Yitzchak beres. Rav Yehuda showed to Rav Yitzchak his son. Right? Kivar shit or kibar shev. Doesn't matter whether he's going to be 6 years old or 7 years old. Rav Kahana Amar kibar shev kibar tamni. He says no, 7 or 8. B'matnita Tana and right we taught kibar teisha kibar eser. By the way, this exact same machloket is the machloket with piudot. Right? We know that with the piutot, paut. That's what we just were talking about. Right? It's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch that you're allowed to do zimun. Right? That once it gets to the onata piutot, you're allowed to use a child for zimun. Piutot, a young child, right? See, you're allowed to use him as a child. What does that mean? So, for example, let's say we are 2, we're above the age of bar mitzvah, and then we have a child. So, my son, for example, he's 12. According to everybody, he's already kibar piutot. So, according to everybody, he's allowed to come and he's allowed to count as zimun. So, I could use him as zimun, but not only at the age of 12. This same machloket is brought down also, right? Which means that there's a machloket. Is it going to be 6 years old, 7 years old? Is it going to be, all these different things, right? Or 7 or 8, or it's going to be, right, 6 or 7, 7 or 8, or even 9 and
whether he's
10.
able to answer or not. He participated.
No, obviously he has to answer, but he has to also know who he's praying to, who he's saying Mikadamazon to. The machloket is what's the age. So we just brought down 3 different shitot: 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, right? Or 9, 10. Sorry, the last one's 9, 10. Okay, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, 10. Says the Gemara, there's no machloket between any of them. Each one was according to his sharpness, which means many times you have a child, but he could be a 6-year-old and he's very, very sharp. And you have an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old and he's not sharp. Okay, fine. The Tama Mai. So what's the reason why the rabbi said that the peutot, the mekhan is mekach? Amar Rav Abba bar Yaakov, Amar Rav Yochanan says Rav Yaakov named Rav Yochanan, Mishum kedei chayav, in order that they should have nichya. If you're going to tell me now that they cannot sell anything, so therefore imagine right now they need parnasa, they need mezonot, and if they can't sell anything, so nobody's going to buy anything. So that's it. They're not going to have anything. Okay, fine. So the Gemara is going to bring another member of Rabbi Abba bar Yaakov, the name of Yochanan. Vayomer la'asher al meltaha hose levush lechol ovdei haBaal. What does it mean that Yehu said to a meltacha, the one that's in charge of a meltacha? What is a meltacha? Amar Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yochanan, davar nimlal v'nimtach, which means it's a bega pishtan. It's a flax clothing, a linen clothing, which the chutim are nimtachim. They're going to be spread out, right? Stretched out when they're going to come and press them, when they're doing the tviyah, when they're doing the kneading, the weaving, sorry. Okay? So he says, Kiat Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz to Bavel, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Yochanan, Shigel lo bunyam ben Nunyam le Rabbi. So Bunyam ben Nunyam sent to Rabbi Sivni v'chomes salsala u'malmelah, which means 4 different types of bigde pishtan. Sivni v'chomes kam gezel pal gedam guza is considered like an egoz v'chetzi. Right, that's how it was. But with the shel salsala u'malmelah is kipis ketabal is balut is like pre-etz, which is a pre-etz v'chetzi. My malmelah, what is malmelah? The same thing. Davar nimlal v'nimtach. So basically, when you fold it up, how big does it become? Okay, v'tautan ad kama, a mistake of a child. Until how much does it go back? Meaning, what happens if the guy came and, like usual, they take advantage? So when they take advantage, they come and they say to the child, you want to sell this? No problem. This is worth half the price. And he comes and he gets him to the half the price. So until when do we say that there's a ta'ut to do with the children's property? Amar Rabbi Yonah, Amar Rabbi Zera, says Rabbi Yonah, name Rabbi Zera, ad shtut kigadol, until a sixth, which is 16.66%, just like a gadol. So Baya comes and he asks the question, matanato mai, what about a matana? Can he give a matana or not? Is it dafka meka chomemkar or even a matana? It's not a matana, but Mar Ravashi says it is a matana. So Apchuah, what does that mean? They went and they said it was the opposite, which means that they said that, they flipped the names. And Rav Yemar said that it is a matana, Mar Ravashi says it's not a matana. And they sent it in front of Rav Mordechai to find out what does he hold. Amalehu, he told them, Zilu Amru lebarmar, go tell to Mor Ravashi, Lavach Yavudu, that wasn't the case. Wasn't this the case? Kavakan Mor, Chad Kare Ara v'Chad Kare Darga, right? When one of his feet was on the land, one of his feet was on the madrigot in the Bet Midrash, Famile, we told him, Matanato Mai, what's halacha the matana? Famalanim, he told us, Matanato is matana. Achat matanat shchimira, v'acha matana bari, doesn't matter whether it's a matanat shchimira or bari, or acha matana meruba, or acha matana muedet, right? That means basically he passed in all those cases that it's going to be the same thing, that it's going to be a good matana. Doesn't matter whether it's going to be matanat katan, which is a shchimira, matana bari of a katan, or matana meruba, matana muetet of a katan. It's always going to be considered a good matana, a good present. Next. Elu devarim, these are the things, shamru mipnei darkei shalom, that they said because of darkei shalom, which means there are certain things that the rabbis came and they said, we are going to do certain things because of darkei shalom. Kohen koreh rishon. Kohen is going to read in the Torah at the beginning. What does that mean? The first aliyah. Why? Darkei shalom. It's not because of, hawk or Darkei shalom. We want peace. Yeah? Ve'acharav Levi. Ve'acharav Israel. Afterwards, first comes Kohen. Afterwards comes Levi, and afterwards comes Israel. Why? Mipnei Darkei shalom. Why? If not, everyone's going to start fighting. Why? I want to get the Rishon. I'm greater than you. I'm greater than you. Everyone's greater than everybody. So everyone starts fighting. Right? Why? I want to get the Rishon. So therefore, what do? Very simple. You give it to the Kohen. There's no fighting. He's a Kohen. Why? Not because of him. Because his great-great-great-grandfather. Nothing to do with him. So okay, so you give it to him. So now they know that there's no fighting. If I'm not a Kohen, I can't fight for the Aliyat Kohen. If I'm not a Levi, I can't fight for the Levi. That's it. Darkei shalom. Me'arevim bevayit yashan. Also, they're going to place Eruvei Chatzerot in a house which they usually put it because of Darkei shalom. Right? That means they come and they put it there in that house because of Darkei shalom. Okay? Yes, Eruv Chatzerot. Okay, they put it in a house which is the Yashan. Also, that means basically, even though there's newer houses, you put it in the same house that you always put it in. Why? Darkei shalom. Third halakha, Nuntet Amubet 59b. Bor shukarov le'amma, a pit which is close to an amma. An amma is taking the water to the nahar, to the sadot, like it's like a irrigation canal. Right? Mitmaleh rishon, it's going to come and going to be filled first because of the Darkei shalom. Right? Because if not, there's going to come a whole bunch of machlokot who fills up from the bore first. So it's not very simple. A bore which is karov to the amma which gives the irrigation, that's going to be filled up first. Right? Because it's right there. Okay? Metsudot, chayav ve'ofot dagim, yesh b'hem mishum gezel, neder Darkei shalom. Imagine right now I set up a trap. And the trap comes and it catches, whether it's a chayav, a off, or dagim. Technically speaking, you didn't make a kinyan. It was your trap, but you know what I could do? Imagine right now, it comes, it traps. I come to it, I take it.
You didn't make a kinyan.
You didn't make a kinyan.
So that's not theft.
No, it's not theft. He says the only reason it's a asur mishum gezel is because of Darkei shalom. Yeah?
He bought a car, he didn't do a kinyan. I can come and take his car.
You said he bought.
You bought it, you did the kinyan. Yeah, whenever you buy a car, there's money, right? Which is there's one form of a kinyan, the shtar, which is another form of the kinyan, and then there's handing over the keys. It's another form of the kinyan. Okay?
But anyway,
Rabbi Yosef Omer, but one second, we're in the middle of this. 1 second, yeah? Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef says, Gezel Gamur. So he likes David's shot. Right? He said, no, it's not just Stam Neder. It's Gezel Gamur.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah? Fine. Right? You were saved by the bell. Right? He says, Metziat Cheresh Shoteh Vekatan Yesh Behem Mishum Gezel Neder Ke Shalom. Imagine right now a Shoteh finds something. Or a Katan finds something. Technically speaking, you could take it away from the Katan.
Yeah.
Or take it away. Why? It's not, he doesn't have anything. He can't be acquiring it. But, Darke Shalom. You're not allowed to do that. Rabbi Yosef says, Gezel Gamur. Yeah? Okay, fine. Next. Yeah? Next, he comes and he says, Ani, Hamrakef, right? Berosh Zait. Imagine right now you have an Ani that he's cutting down from the Zait. Okay? Masechet is Gezel also. Whatever falls on the floor is also going to be Gezel. He comes and he says, right, it's going to be a Gezel. Why is it Gezel? He comes and he says, because of the same thing, because of Darkei Shalom. Then he says, Rabbi Yosef says, it's Gezel Gamur. We're not going to be moche if you're going to have the goyim that they're coming and they're taking, they're coming and they're taking all these things also. Why? Because of Darkei Shalom. Meaning, if you find a goy that he's coming and taking leket shechal peah, you don't tell him anything. Why don't you tell him anything? The same thing. Because of the Keshalom. You're not going to come and you're not going to, do all these things. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara, how do we know that the Kohen comes before the Levim Yisrael? Amar of Matna says Matna, the Makat says Besuk. Right? So Moshe Rabbeinu is going to write the Torah and he's going to give it to the Kohanim ben Levi. We don't know that the Kohanim are ben Levi. Meaning Kohanim ben Levi. Obviously Kohanim come from Levi. Any Kohen, Aaron Kohen came from Shevet Levi. So we know that Kohanim come from Levim. So says no, Ela, but it means to say Kohen bereisha, and then afterwards comes the Levi. That's what it means. He's going to give it. Who does he give it to first? First the Kohanim, and then the Levim. Kohen, then Levi, and then Yisrael. Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Aman Me'ach, another pasuk. V'nigishu Kohanim b'nei Levi. In fact, they said Nigishu Kohanim b'nei Levi. We don't know that the Kohanim are b'nei Levi. Ela Kohen bereisha v'ada Levi. Rashi Amar comes and he says, Mehacha, another place, right? Kona. He says, Rashi comes and he says, Mehacha, another place. The children of Amram are Aharon and Moshe, and Aaron was separated like Disho, Kodesh Kodeshim. Meaning that he's a higher level, right? Because he's a Kohen. What is V'kidashto? Lechol davar shebikdusha. You have to sanctify him in anything of kedusha. Tanan Rishman, we learned that the Kadmon Rishman v'kidashto lechol davar shebikdusha. Yiftoach rishon, to start with anything of kavod. Ulvarech rishon, to start in the seudah first. He gets served first. You always give it to the kohen. Okay. Obviously, if the chokhmah Torah comes before kiuna, as is already brought down in the Mishnah. Right, but this is talking about in general. If there's no chachamim, they're all equal in chachamim, right? So therefore, it's the Kohen comes first. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef, says Abaye to Rav Yosef, mipnei darkei shalom. Right? 1 second. If you're going to tell me, then it's darkei shalom. Doraita. Every single pasuk you just brought me until now is a pasuk midoraita. So why are you telling me in the Mishnah darkei shalom? So says the Gemara, Amar le doraita mipnei darkei shalom. No, you're right. Everything that we mentioned until now was Doraita, but it's because of Darkei Shalom, meaning that we're explaining, right, the Doraita. So says the Gemara, I don't understand you. The entire Torah is Darkei Shalom. Why? Tichtiv derachea darchei noam v'chol netivotea shalom. It's derachea darchei noam. The Torah is pleasant, and all the paths of the Torah are shalom. Elamar Abaye, but rather Abaye says, lechdemor. Just like more, what does that mean? The Tanya we learned in the Braita, whenever you have two people, they wait for each other in order to drink or to eat from the keara. Shlosha, they don't wait. The one that's doing the motzi, he's going to take his hands first to eat. If you wanted to give kavod to his rabbi or somebody that's greater to him, so then he is allowed to come and he's allowed to, how do you call this? He is allowed to come and to give it to that person. So more comes and he says, Lo shanu ela beseuda. He comes and he says, that's only talking about the dinim of seuda. But Bet Knesset, lo, which means in the Bet Knesset, a Kohen cannot defer, right, and start giving it to somebody else. Meaning, if it's in his house, and you give the kavod to the Kohen, so the Kohen could come and say, you know what, I'm giving it to Levi, or I'm giving it. Now you could do it in a Seudah, right? In any of these things, yeah. Not in the Bet Knesset. Why? Because then they're going to come, they're going to start fighting again, and then again you have a problem. Meaning, imagine right now, right? The Kohen could come and say, you know what, I'm staying here, but give my aliyah to this guy. We don't do that. If you want, you could leave. And then we could give the aliyah to whoever we want. But you cannot come. No, that's something else. There you could ask him for us, right? That's something else. Right? But we're talking about
Cohen stay outside and said, give it to my uncle.
No, but that's what we're saying. We do not accept that. Right? We do not accept that a Kohen comes and he says, I'm not taking the aliyah, give it to Mr. A or give it to Mr. B. We do not accept that. Why? Because if not, you have the balagan here. Right? Right? They go out and then we choose the other ones.
Then the
right?
rabbi gives, and then there is balagan.
Right? So fine. So Amar Rav Matana, Rav Matana says, Had the Amarta V'Tekneset, that which you just said in Bet Knesset, we don't let you. Lo Amran and Shabbatov Yomim Tovim Deshchich Rabin. He comes and he says that's only going to be in the Shabbatot Yomim Tovim. There's a lot of people. Aval B'Sheni V'Chamishi, but on Mondays and Thursdays, the Kohen could be mechabed somebody else to read, because since there's not a lot of people in the Bet Knesset, they're not going to come to fighting. Meaning Shabbat Yom Tov, it's jam packed. Imagine right now the Kohen. There's one Kohen. He comes and he says, you know what, I'm giving it to Mr. A. You're going to start going crazy. Right? So therefore, right, however though, right, on during the week, there's no problem. Okay? So says the Gemara, one second. So he comes and he says this, are you going to tell me right now that on Mondays and Thursdays you're allowed to? That Ravuna Kari Bekare Veshabbatov Yamim Tovim. Ravuna did read for Kohen, even when on Shabbat and Yom Tov. You just came and you just told me that there's a difference between Shabbat and Yom Tov and what? And Monday and Thursday. Beforehand, we made a difference between Seudah and Bet Knesset. Now we're making a difference between even in the Bet Knesset itself. One more time. Seudah, Kohen's allowed. A Kohen can give the kavod to somebody else.
Not in the shul.
Not in the shul. Then we said, no. There is a difference. When in the shul on Monday and Thursday, yes, there's not a lot of people. There won't be fights. Shabbat and Yom Tov, no. Now comes the Gemara and says, what are you talking about? Ravuna, he read Kohen. Right now, Ravuna was not a Kohen, but the Kohen used to give him kilu the kavod, and that was on Shabbat and Yom Tov. Answers the Gemara, Shane Ravuna da pilu Rabbi Yami Bravasi kana chashuvei d'Eretz Yisrael. Ravuna was different than even Rabbi Yami and Ravasi. They were the very Kohanim chashuvim, the most chashuv Kohanim, the most chashuv Kohanim in Eretz Yisrael. They used to come and bow to him because of his gadol b'Torah. So therefore, since he was greater than all the Kohanim, he was a gadol ador, right? He was able to do that. That's why, for example, Rav Vadia, gadol ador is allowed to come and he's allowed to get the aliyah, even on Shabbat and Yamim Tovim. If it's not gadol ador, no, Shabbat and Yom Tov, no, because then you're going to start fighting. But weekdays, we said yes, right? Because there's not a lot of people in the Bet Knesset. Right? But one second. But right, when we're talking about the gadol ador is allowed to. So Amar Abaya comes and he says, Naktinan, we have a Masoret, En Sham Kohen, Parda Chavila. If there's no Kohen, we got rid of the Chavila. We got rid of the package. Remember, it's a package deal. Kohen, Levi, then Israel. If you get rid of the Kohen, you got rid of the package, so the Levi loses out. Because you got rid of the package. So now there's no Kohen, Levi, and Israel anymore. Now you can do 3 Israeli. The Amar Abaya also says there's another Masoret. Naktinan. Remember, whenever it says the word Naktinan, it means a Masoret. We have a tradition. We have a Masoret, and Sham Lewi, Kore Kohen. If there's no Lewi, the Kohen reads instead of the Lewi. Okay? The Kohen reads instead of the Levi. Huh? Is it so? The Amar of Yochanan says of Yochanan, Kohen achar Kohen lo yikra mishum pgamo shel lishon. Lewi achar Lewi lo yikra mishum pgam shel lishon. What does that mean? If there's halacha, you're not allowed to call up a Kohen after another Kohen, or a Lewi after another Levi. Why are you not allowed to do that?
Not Hazan, Eli Cohen. You're not here. He's reading the Torah. The son of Philip Cohen comes first.
Basically, what we're trying to say here is that you cannot call up a Kohen after a Kohen or a Levi after a Levi. Why? Because of the Begam. Because what's going to happen? You're going to come and you're going to say, there's a pgam here. What's the pgam? The pgam is that all of a sudden, right, you're going to come and you're going to have this pgam, right, of a person coming and saying, listen, how do you call this? That you're going to come and you're going to say that the first coin was not good. That's why you're calling up a second coin, right? So kilu, you're trying to make up for it. So that's why you're not allowed to do it one after another. So he says, Ki kamnin and beoto kohen. He says, no, but that's the same kohen. Meaning, when we said that if there's no Levi, the kohen reads in his stead, it didn't mean that you're calling up another kohen. The same kohen. So the same kohen gets 2 for 1. Because if you're going to call up another kohen, that means you're saying that the first kohen was pagum. So if there's no Levi, the same kohen will get both aliyot. 2 for 1. Understand? He also has to pay twice, right? 2 for 1. Right? Okay. Says the Gemara, Maishna lewi achal lewi. The kapagam shnehem the amri chad mina ulav levihu kohen achar kohen nami amri. The same thing with kohen achar kohen. Chad mina ulav kohen. We're going to see the exact same thing. Guys, he comes and he says, okay, go on. He comes and he says, for example, there's the Gemara. He says, kegon the muchzak lam bavua dehai sheni de kohenhu. What happened was like this. We said, what is the reason why there's going to be pagam shnehem? Because we said one of them is not going to be a Levi. So Levi, it's not going to be a Levi. Kohen achar kohen nami, we're going to say one of them is not a Kohen. And says the Gemara, we already know that he's muchzak, that the father is a Kohen, and therefore they're not going to say that the son is a Levi. So we're not going to suspect the pagam of a dishon. So we already know that the other one, the father, is going to be a Levi. Ela, but rather Amri, they're going to say mamzeret netina nasiv. Maybe they're going to say that the father got married to a mamzeret or a netina. Upasle lezare, and he made his child pasul. Hachanami, so to here, maybe he got married to grusha or chalutza. Ve'achle lezare, and he made his children sulim. Okay, so he comes and he says, sof Levi mikahave. Says what? But is there a Levi bichlal? Right? So he comes and he says, hello. After we just said about the concept of the kilushav, the kiuna, that he's considered a Yisrael. What's going on there? If you already know that it's a kohen and then you have the Levi. So we're not going to say that he's a halal. So we're not going to suspect the pagam of the rishon. Ulman, but according to the Manda Amar that says who's that the words of Rabbi Yochanan that he said that we have the pagam of the rishon. Ila yoshvin. If you're going to tell me it's the people that are sitting down in the Bet Knesset, hakachazule, they see him, meaning they see the Kohen Rishon is one of the 7 because they didn't add an extra one. Ela layotzin. It's the people that are going out. What does it mean like that? If you call up 7 people to the Torah, you know that every person that went up to the Torah was counted as part of the minyan, right? Because there's 7 aliyot on Shabbat. So if you call up the 7 people and you didn't do any mosifim, you already know that anybody that was there was called up. If you call up a mosif, so then it could be that maybe one of those people were not really counted as a minyan. No. And that's why you counted as a mosif. Right, that's why every Shabbat you do 20 mosifim, right? So what happens though is that you have to actually come, right? And you have to actually pay attention, right, to how many of the numbers. So he says, if the people are staying in the Bet Knesset, right, you already see the Kohen there. And you see that you didn't call him Mosifim. So you know that he was counted as Minyan. So therefore, why in the world are you going to think that he's Pagum? Answers the Gemara, because of the people that are leaving. I mean, it could be somebody went to the washroom, and he's going to think, you know what, 1 second. They called up the Kohen, and then they called up another Kohen. That means they did another few Mosifim. That means that guy wasn't good. So because the person that left, for whatever reason, he went to the washroom, he had to this, he had to do whatever it is, that's the reason why it's going to be that case. Right? After the Kohen and Levi, who's going to read? He didn't have the answer. They went, they asked her, which means this, there's an order. And this is actually brought down in Shulchan Aruch, by the way. The order of the Shulchan Aruch in Sivan Kuf Lamed Vav is brought down. First, you call up Kohen Levi. After Kohen Levi, you call up Talmidei Chachamim, which they are the ones which are in charge of the tzibur. After Kohen, Talmidei Chachamim, which are in charge of the tzibur, you call up Talmidei Chachamim, which could be put in charge of the tzibur. Meaning, it could be that he doesn't have an official position, but he's fitting for it. He gets the next one. After that comes people which they are the Knesset. Right? What does that mean? They are the ones that, board or whatever it is. You understand? Right? Obviously, board, we mean the real boards, right? Appointed, this, that, all these things, right? And then after that comes what? Then comes Kol Adam. Then comes, right, every single person. Exactly. So there's the different levels of how do you get the aliyot. Have a wonderful day.